was different. Canada, I came home to, was a peacekeeper, not a war maker. And I valued that. In Canada, the CCF that became the NDP was a respected, legitimate party. And in the United States, it would have been regarded as a commie or a pinko organization. And I valued that. In Canada, Tommy Douglas could be one of the great heroes of our nation. Canada was Medicare. Canada to me was the equalization payments where the better off provinces shared some of their good fortune with those provinces that were less fortunate. Canada to me meant Quebec and the National Film Board and the CBC. And I have never regretted that decision I made, but in the last 10 years, I have seen the erosion of many of those things that made me treasure this country. I began a career in television. I didn't know it was going to be a career, but in 1962, when I did my first series, and it was a series on science when I was at the University of Alberta. And I went into this medium because I felt that Canadians were woefully ignorant about science. That science was by far the most potent force that was shaping our lives and society, and that it was important for Canadians to be informed about this important area so that they could be involved in deciding how these various new technologies would affect their lives. So I believe that by providing the best information possible to the public through television, that we would be a better informed society and make better decisions. That was my belief, and I'm very proud of my career with the CBC all those years. But in order to pursue his agenda of making Canada a super petro state, Mr. Harper has denied access to the very information, the kind of information that we need to make those best informed decisions. He has shut down avenues of information from research facilities like the Experimental Lakes area, polar research in the summer. He has actually burned or discarded important documents in libraries, government libraries, and he has demanded that scientists be vetted through the Prime Minister's office, I assume, through the government and their publications before they can be delivered to public. He doesn't realize that's not how science works. The minute science is vetted through the lenses of ideology or government, it no longer is credible. It doesn't have any credibility in the international world. He discredits the very kind of information that we need to make proper decisions. So how do we make informed decisions in this society? Do we listen to right-wing think tanks like the Fraser Institute? Do we listen to ideologues? Do we listen to or read the Bible or the Quran and make our decisions? I believe that science is absolutely crucial, and the scientific community is being blocked and undermined in so many ways today. In 1988, Margaret Thatcher was filmed picking up litter in Hyde Park in London. And she turned the camera and said, "I'm a greenie too." In 1988, a man ran for president of the United States and said, "If you vote for me, I will be an environmental president." His name was George H.W. Bush. There wasn't a green bone in his body, but the public, the Americans had made the environment the #1 issue of the time. And he had to say it. 1988, Brian Mulroney was re-elected. And to show he cared about the environment, he appointed the brightest star to be the Minister of the Environment. Now, I see some people as old as I am here. You remember who that was? Lucien Bouchard. And I interviewed Lucien 4 months after he was appointed. I said, "Mr. Bouchard, what do you think is the most important environmental issue facing Canadians?" And he said, immediately, global warming. I was very impressed. I said, how serious is it? And these are his exact words. It threatens the survival of our species. We have to act now. 1988. And what has happened to that since? Mr. Chrétien signed the Kyoto Protocol. He didn't sign that as a liberal. He signed that as the Prime Minister of Canada. He committed Canada to the Kyoto targets of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And yet, Mr. Harper actually pulled us out of the Kyoto Protocol. I thought that one of Mr. Harper's platforms was law and order. There was an international agreement that Canada had committed itself to, and yet he broke it and pulled us out. Well, I should have known better. He passed a law designating elections every 4 years on specific dates, and broke his own law within months and called an election. What is going on? In in the years that followed 1988, we saw a tailing off of concern about climate for two reasons. One was we went into a slight economic bump. We started a small recession. And when there's a recession, we act as if the environment has nothing to do with the economy. And so the economy took over. But hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by the fossil fuel industry, especially Exxon, and by right-wing think tanks and by right-wing ideologues like the Koch brothers, to promulgate the notion that the science isn't in, that this is junk science that's coming out. Scientists lie and cheat. You've heard of ClimateGate and all that. And that this is, if there is warming, it's a natural process because global warming, of course, happens over long periods of time. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was set up in part to try to provide a resource of strong information on whether climate is happening, and if so, what is it? The IPCC is one of the most conservative groups you can imagine. Because, wouldn't you say that, Gordon? You're the expert here. This is a member of the IPCC, and these reports have to be vetted through so many levels. They're very conservative, and virtually every report that has come out with targets has fallen short of what has actually happened. The oceans are rising faster and more than we imagined. The temperatures are changing. The IPCC reports, nevertheless, have become more urgent with every year that that passes, because we are facing an enormous crisis. And Canada, of all industrialized countries, is probably more vulnerable to the consequences of climate change than any other nation. We're a northern country. For 40 years, the Inuit have been telling us something's going on in the Arctic. The ice isn't as thick, it's melting faster. Something's going wrong up there. And because we are a northern country, we know the warming is taking place at a much greater rate than in the temperate area. We have the longest marine coastline of any country in the world. Sea level rise, just from the oceans getting a little warmer, water expands. And when the great ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica begin to fall into the oceans, we're going to have massive rises in meters and maybe even tens of meters. Canada will be more affected than any other country. And then you think of the economic areas that are climate sensitive: agriculture, forestry, fisheries, tourism, winter sports. These are all going to be heavily, and are being heavily impacted by climate change. So when we have a prime minister that says the economy is his highest priority and expertise, it makes no sense that climate change would be ignored. When someone like Sir Nicholas Stern, who was once the lead economist at the World Bank, said that if we do not take serious measures to reduce the risk of climate change, the consequences will be economically catastrophic. Up to 20% of the global economy could disappear. This is not leadership. To me, this is willful blindness on the part of our Prime Minister. We elect him to watch out for us and lead us into the future. I call it an intergenerational crime. By ignoring this, he is dooming future generations to the consequences, and it's only going to get worse for them. I like to contrast the visit of Mr. Obama recently to the oil state of Alaska, above the Arctic Circle, the first president to go above the Arctic Circle. And what did he do? He took it to the Alaskans and said, we've got to act on climate change, and we've got to face the consequences. Contrast that with Mr. Harper, who just spent 5 days in the Arctic and never once mentioned climate change. The impact of climate change is undeniable and is now costing millions, if not billions of dollars. So Mr. Harper has always said, no, we can't act on climate change. The Americans are the ones that we're going to follow. Well, Mr. Obama has been leading in a very different direction from Canada, and there's no evidence that we're going to turn around and follow that. I think that no one really knows what the best way forward is going to be. I think that we need, well, there's no question fossil fuels have to be phased out very, very rapidly, but it goes far beyond fossil fuels. Agriculture and the consumption of meat, and this is something environmentalists don't like to face. Meat is by far one of the greatest contributors to climate change. The way that we raise them and the contribution of methane. We obviously have to phase out fossil fuels, but many other aspects become more efficient. But the opportunity lies in finding the alternative, renewable, non-polluting energy sources. We just have to make a commitment. I think the opportunities are great, and I don't think we have a choice. What astounds, sorry, can I take 2 or 3 more minutes? A few years ago, I got a call from the CEO of a very large oil company in the tar sands. You would all know the company if I told you the name of it. And he said, would it be possible for me to come down and talk to you? And I said, well, of course, I'd love to talk to you. So the next day he came down and I welcomed him to my office. I said, I am so honored that you've taken the time. Thank you so much for coming. But before you come in through the door, I would like you to leave your identity as the CEO of an oil company outside the door. I want you to meet me just man to man, as a human being to human being. Well, immediately he was not very happy with that, because clearly he had come down to negotiate something. So he came in and I said, look, I know this is weird, but I can't see trying to negotiate or fight if we don't start with some kind of common platform of agreement. Surely we first got to agree on what our fundamental needs are before we start negotiating. Well, again, he felt very uncomfortable. I said, look, let me tell you what I mean. If you don't have air for 3 to 4 minutes, you're dead. If you have to breathe polluted air, you're sick. So can we not say all human beings require clean air as our highest priority? I said, you're 60 to 70% water by weight. We're basically a big blob of water with enough thickener added. We don't dribble away on the floor. But our bodies are, they don't hold all that water. It comes out of our skin and our eyes and our nose and our crotch, and we lose water. So we have to keep topping up. If you don't have water for 3 to 4 days, you're dead.
Clean water.
If you have to drink polluted water, you're sick. So I said, Mr. CEO, can you not agree with me? Clean water, like clean air, is our highest priority. And then I said, if you don't have food for 4 to 6 weeks, you're dead. If you have to eat contaminated food, you're sick. So can we put clean food in the soil we grow it in, up there with air and water? And then I said, all of the energy in your body and mine, all of that is sunlight. That energy we need to grow and move and reproduce comes from photosynthesis. Our plants capture that energy, convert it into chemical energy, and then we get it by eating the plants or eating the animals that eat the plants. And we store that chemical energy, and then we burn it and liberate the energy of the sun in our body. Can we not put photosynthesis up there. And then what is it that gives us clean air, clean water, clean soil, and clean energy? Guess what? It's the web of living things on the planet. They cleanse, replenish, create what the First Nations call the four sacred elements: earth, air, fire, and water. So can we put the variety of life? I said, Mr. CEO, can you not agree with me as a human being? Every person on the planet needs to have those things. So that's got to be the foundation of the way we live. And then we ask, how can we have an economy? How do we make money? And all of those other things. Well, I'm afraid I have to say he couldn't agree with me in the end. And it was unfair of me. He had come down as a CEO of a big company to negotiate. If he were to go back to his shareholders and say, well, I had a talk with Suzuki and I agree with him. We can't do anything to bugger up the air, the water, the soil, or the variety of life. He'd get fired in a flash. Because the shareholders want to maximize the profit they make from their investment. But I believe this is what we have to do. We're going to have in December 195 countries meeting in Paris, negotiating over the atmosphere that belongs to no one, but it belongs to everyone, through the lenses of 195 national boundaries and 195 national economies. Now, how can we possibly expect the atmosphere to be shoehorned into these human demands or these human agendas? This is the 21st conference, COP21 in Paris. And I said to the French ambassador, the first thing you have to do in Paris is to declare the COP meetings a total failure. If COP21 is to succeed, we've got to go a different way. And this is why I begged him. Put down air, water, soil, energy, and variety of life. Put that down as a foundation of your negotiations, and then talk about what we're going to do. I fear that won't be done, and certainly Canada has removed itself from this whole process, except insofar as monkey wrenching it as much as we could. So this is a challenge. We face very serious issues today, and I don't believe for a minute that this government is capable of dealing them in the way that is going to be protect the future for our children and grandchildren. So that's why we're all here today. Thank you very much.